Hello everyone, in this movie, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson portrays a tough criminal. He works as a getaway driver, partnering with his brother to carry out heists. After one of their robberies, a rival gang discovers them and attempts to steal their money. The hero reveals the location of the hidden cash, but in return, his brother is killed, and he himself is shot in the head. Miraculously, he survives but is sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, his burning desire for revenge remains strong, leading him on a challenging journey to seek retribution against everyone involved in his brother's murder. In the prison, a large tattooed man paces around his cell, waiting to be released. There is a photo on the wall of him with an unknown person. Finally, the prisoner is taken out of his cell and introduced to us as Driver. The prison warden gives him some advice and his business card in case he encounters any difficulties outside. However, Driver is only interested in one thing: finding the exit. As soon as he is outside, Driver discards the business card and decides to go for a run. After a long run along the highway, he finds his stylish Chevrolet Chevelle SS at a junkyard. The keys are waiting for him on the front wheel, so he uncovers the car, starts it without any issues, and drives off in search of his first target. All the necessary information is carefully hidden in the glove compartment, where he also discovers a revolver under the seat. Since traffic rules weren't taught in prison, Driver parks his car and, disregarding other vehicles on the highway, heads straight to the office. Amidst the traffic and frustrated drivers, he reaches the office without bothering with pleasantries and immediately confronts one of the employees. Without warning, he shoots the office clerk in the forehead. Driver leaves, but realizes he has been captured on the security camera. The next. In this episode, we are taken to a roadside motel where a man is attempting to purchase illegal substances from a dealer in the restroom. He takes out crumpled bills from his pocket, but the dealer is not satisfied with the payment. After a brief altercation, the buyer convinces the dealer to come to an agreement. The scene shifts to the office where the driver killed the man. It is filled with police officers, including the addict from the restroom. None of the policemen are particularly happy to see him, especially the female detective, referred to as Cop. It turns out that he has been assigned to the case involving the murder of the clerk, just a few weeks before his retirement. The woman puts the cop's cigarette in a cup of coffee and warns him about the no-smoking policy. They are then assigned to work together as partners. The next episode begins in a small office where the driver arrives. Two men are listening to a report on the TV about the recent murder of a clerk. When the driver enters, the man behind the desk mentions that the murdered man was a troublemaker. He asks for money for the car he left for the ex-prisoner. The driver pays up and asks for the names of other criminals involved in his brother's case. However, the man says that the price of information has increased over the 10 years the hero has been in jail. He claims that it took him a long time and a lot of money to track down these people. The driver is not satisfied with the new pricing policy. In an attempt to intimidate him, the informant tries to unleash his bodyguard, a formidable champion of Samoan street fights. However, the moment the bodyguard catches a glimpse of the tattoo on the driver's arm, the scene ends. Driver's tough act disappears as his arm trembles. "I know who you are. Who is your brother? I have no beef with you." In a panic, he calls the hero a ghost and leaves in a hurry. Without his bodyguard, the informant becomes more cooperative and even gives Driver a small compensation. Meanwhile, at the police station, a cop and his new partner, Cicero, watch CCTV footage from the office where Driver killed the first victim on his revenge spree. They notice that the killer and the clerk clearly knew each other. At the end of the conversation, the cop gets a call from the mother of his son and asks him to drive the boy to a baseball game, then hangs up. While the police officers investigate the crime, Driver heads to his next target. We are introduced to a new character, codenamed Killer. He lives in a luxurious house with his beautiful girlfriend and is committed to staying in shape. On Killer's walls, there are photos of him, including magazine covers that feature his face, reflecting his achievements in his line of work. It is further revealed that Killer had leg problems when he was a kid, but he practices intense yoga that borders on breakdancing. Killer wakes his girlfriend up and talks to her in the backyard. He claims that he's done with yoga and now needs something more challenging. He seems a little too upbeat for an assassin, but he does get an assignment for a new target over the phone. Got a new client for you, Killer is sent a photo of Driver. Without hesitation, he promptly gets ready, assisted by his girlfriend. He packs his things, picks a gun, and drives away in one of his sports cars. Right before leaving, Killer dashes out to the girl and gives her a kiss. Killer then talks to his counselor over the phone. He says that he's getting tired of his assignments, but he lies to her about his true profession and introduces himself as a surgeon who removes tumors. The doctor doesn't believe him but continues the session. At the same time, Killer watches a suspicious old man. While at the police station, Detective Cicero examines a photo of Driver's tattoo. Sergeant Mallory apologizes to her for partnering her up with the cop, but asks that she refrain from interfering with his role in the investigation. After this talk, Cicero shows the cop a picture of Driver, who was identified through surveillance cameras and the testimony of the prison warden. The cop grins when he sees Driver. It is revealed that the man had been making money in prison by smuggling. Cicero tells the cop that Driver was detained 10 years ago for a bank robbery he was involved in as a getaway driver. Then, we are shown that very robbery and how the protagonist's gang cleverly evades the police chase thanks to Driver's outstanding skills, especially when he drives in reverse. Apparently, the police have nothing against such a clever move. As Cicero continues to fill the cop in on the details of the case, we see the house of the elderly man that Killer is watching. The old man comes to the apartment not alone, but with a young woman who's helping him with groceries. He persuades his guests to stay for a drink. Suddenly, Driver pulls up to the house where this is happening. Killer finishes talking to the therapist on the phone and prepares his weapon. He says he's going to propose to his girlfriend. Also, when he's already getting out of the car, he tells the doctor that he is off his meds, though the therapist tells him that's a bad idea and then hangs up. Meanwhile, Driver gets out of the car and moves towards the old man's place. Killer follows Driver and walks through the door behind him. Meanwhile, the old man slips something into his caregiver's drink and waits for them to pass out. Another flashback shows footage that a cop and Cicero are watching. The footage, captured with an amateur camera, shows a driver and his brother being held hostage by other thugs. The driver's brother pleads with him not to reveal the location of the stolen money, as it would get them both killed. The captors claim that other members of the driver's gang have already suffered this fate. The thugs insist that the only chance for them to stay alive is to disclose the location of the money. The driver is unsure of what to do, as he fears for his brother's safety. Eventually, under pressure from the thugs, the driver tells them where the money is. Immediately after, one of the thugs slits his brother's throat. Some of the thugs don't understand why they had to kill the man, but most of them don't care. The whole thing is filmed by an old man who is being watched by a killer. The movie then shifts back to the present, where the driver knocks down the old pervert's door and foils his plans. The elderly thug tries to defend himself by claiming that they killed the driver's brother under someone else's orders, but this excuse doesn't save him and he gets shot twice. The driver leaves the frightened caretaker in the apartment and runs out into the hallway, where the killer is waiting for him. A girl in the hallway prevents the killer from carrying out his task without making too much noise. The driver pushes the girl into the next room and a shootout ensues. He doesn't shoot the killer but forces him to hide around the corner. This trick buys the driver enough time to escape. The killer tries to pursue his target but fails. From the old man's apartment window, the assassin observes smoke rising from the tires of the driver's rapidly departing Chevrolet. The flashback ends with the driver being shot in the back of the head by an unknown person, but miraculously surviving due to a metal plate in his head. The cop shows up at his ex-wife's house to pick up his son, but she accuses him of being late. He tries to explain that he's caught up in a serious case, but she doesn't want to listen. She threatens to take full custody of their son and demands that they hurry to the game. On their way, the cop's overweight son Tommy confesses that he isn't really into baseball and hardly gets a chance to play. The cop assures Tommy that he will talk to his coach. However, he receives a call from Cicero asking him to arrive at a crime scene. Tommy becomes upset, but his dad pretends like he's already handled everything and decides to stay for the game instead of working. He tries to win his son's favor. Eventually, the cop arrives at the crime scene 2 hours late and receives a caustic comment from Cicero. They discover that the murdered old man was a fan of filming dirty tapes and was the one who filmed the murder of the driver's brother. The officers are also aware of the shootout with the killer but have no idea who the second shooter is. In his room, the killer tells his future bride that the target proved to be more challenging than expected. He admires the driver for his calm and fearless demeanor and gets the idea to propose over the phone. The next day at the station, Cicero notices something strange. A tattoo on a cop's arm reveals that he used to work in the notorious Los Angeles homicide squad, known for its corrupt practices. He meets his ex-wife Marina, who was his informant during his time there. The cop also reveals that he was in rehab for addiction. His partner gives him strange looks, but he brushes it off as ancient history. The cop lies and claims to have gotten clean when his son was born. From his car window, he observes a woman and her son, whom he mistakenly believes to be his own. He decides to pay her a visit with a gun in hand. Inside the house, he discovers that the woman he was seeking is actually his ex-wife. She was not allowed to visit him when he was in prison. The cop mistakenly believes that the boy he saw through the car window is his son, but he is wrong. The woman has moved on and built a new life for herself and her son. Devastated by this news, the cop leaves to continue his path of vengeance. His former lover tells him that she knows what he's up to and wishes him luck. Meanwhile, the killer decides to have a fancy wedding with his fiancée, Lily. There are car races, a beautiful ceremony, and a romantic shooting at Cairns. The killer offers his wife a fresh start in Pasadena and promises to quit his job as a hired gun. At the same time, the cop arrives at Marina's house uninvited. He is surprised to find her watching the coverage of his case on TV. The cop offers her a chance to get back together and start anew, but she declines, stating that she has moved on and built a different life for herself. She is currently getting a degree and aims to improve her and her son's life. In an attempt to persuade her, the cop hands over his stash of illegal substances and promises to go to rehab. However, he suggests dealing with it after the case is over. Driver, listening to the radio, heads to his new target, a strip club. He tracks down the right person and goes inside. His target turns out to be a security guard, the man who slit his brother's throat. After a brief conversation, the killer tells the elderly doorman, Joe, to leave the restroom and pretend he hasn't seen anything. Following the killer's suggestion, the old man complies. A knife fight ensues, and the driver wins. The barely breathing man on the floor apologizes to him and asks the driver to call his son and tell him he's sorry. Back at home, the killer looks at photos of his life, including pictures of his childhood and his crippled legs. He starts frantically polishing his weapon, and his wife catches him in the act. She hopes that he will quit, but he decides to finish the job first. Cop wakes up in bed with his son, who says he doesn't like baseball. The cop responds by saying that the boy will improve with practice and suggests playing together. Later, he discovers Marina heavily intoxicated in the bathroom. Marina confesses that she's afraid of ending up in the same destructive cycle they had before. The cop throws the remaining substances in the trash and falls asleep with Marina. The fourth day of the narrative begins with the cop and the killer leaving their homes with puzzled and worried looks on their faces. The detective receives a call from Cicero, who tells him she has found a lead. Both of the driver's victims were police informants involved in his brother's murder. She asks the cop to look into this, but he replies that he has to talk to a stabbing victim from Henderson. Ignoring Cicero's request, the cop goes to the emergency room for questioning. After hearing on the radio that the killer he stabbed is alive and being treated at the hospital, the driver swiftly turns his car around and speeds off towards the medical facility. Meanwhile, the killer's client informs him of the driver's surviving target and suggests that he tries to finish the job. The cop is the first to arrive at the clinic, but the killer wastes no time and heads straight to the operating room where doctors are trying to save his target's life. Without hesitation, he fires several bullets into the guy's forehead. Hearing the gunshots, the cop emerges from a nearby room and pursues the driver until they reach the basement, where they engage in a fierce gunfight. At a critical moment, the driver catches his opponent off guard, forcing him to kneel. However, as soon as the cop closes his eyes, the hero disappears. The driver gets into his car and drives away. On the way, he receives a call from the son of his brother's killer, the boy. The boy threatens to avenge his father. The hero tells him to do what he must, but to understand there will be repercussions for his choice. At that moment, the killer catches up with him from behind. The risky chase doesn't last long. The driver gets shot in the neck, but manages to shoot his enemy's tire and escape into the darkness of the night. A frustrated killer receives a call from the client informing him of the cancellation of the assignment. However, the killer is determined not to give up so easily and refuses to abandon his final job. The driver arrives at his father's home suspecting that he might have set them up after the heist. But he finds only his mother there. The woman lost her husband 3 or 4 years ago. She tends to her son's wound and assures him that her late husband loved Gary, so he would have never betrayed him. The driver explains that they robbed the bank to pay off Gary's debts and that he willingly volunteered to help because he couldn't abandon his brother in need. After picking up his brother's ashes, he sets off to his next target and along the way keeps thinking about who set them up. At the police station, the cop tells his partner about his encounter with the driver in the hospital and how he miraculously survived. Everyone around him congratulates him for almost taking down the criminal. Cicero forgives him for hanging up on her and shows the cop a possible list of the driver's targets. They are all informants who have served minimum time for serious offenses. The cop decides to check out the people from the list who have not been attacked by the driver yet. In the meantime, the driver catches up with the final target on his list, only to discover that it's a traveling evangelist he has been listening to on the radio throughout his journey. The preacher conducts his sermons from a mobile temple tent. After arriving at the location, the driver patiently waits for the sermon to conclude before approaching the priest. The preacher confesses that he abandoned his wicked ways long ago and is now dedicated to setting people on the right path. During the capture of the driver and his brother, he was the one who didn't want them to be killed. Before going for a walk, the preacher is visited by his wife and child, which surprises the driver. Though he doesn't want to give up his revenge, on the way to the shore, which will be the last walk for one of them, the men talk. It turns out that the preacher is the father of 5 adopted children. He says that when Gary was killed, he just had to stand watch to earn some easy money. The preacher is honest about what he did but regrets it. He says he took his share of the money and went to jail where he turned to God. The driver clearly hesitates but then puts the preacher on his knees and prepares to shoot. At the last moment, he spares the preacher, allowing him to reunite with his family, while he himself walks back to the temple tent. Inside, the killer awaits him, armed and ready for a fair fight, seeking acknowledgement of his skills. The driver remains composed, calmly stating that he has nothing against the killer. He also points out that the killer clearly has issues. In response, the killer takes the driver's gun away and aims it at his head. Noticing the list lying beside the driver, the mercenary remarks that there should be one more person on it, the man who hired him to kill the driver. But he doesn't say his name. Meanwhile, the cop, who has just arrived, gets out of his car and approaches the temple. He sneaks up on the driver from behind. The cop orders the killer to drop his weapon, threatening him with dire consequences. As soon as the killer complies and puts the gun down, a single gunshot echoes through the air. The cop shot the back of the driver's head. It's revealed that the cop is not only the person who hired the killer, but also the person who tried to eliminate the driver the first time. The cop tells the killer that he decided to get involved when he saw that the mercenary failed to kill the driver in the old man's apartment. The killer shows him the list and notes that the driver didn't even know about the cop. The latter says he realized it when the driver didn't shoot him in the basement of the clinic. It turns out that Gary's girlfriend was the detective's informant, and she ratted the gang out. The rest of the cop's informants helped to take away the money that the driver and his accomplices stole. After hearing this thrilling story, the killer leaves the tent, but the cop catches up with him and tries to give him the payment for the job. It turns out that the young man takes just $1 for his services and calls contract killing his hobby. However, he refuses to accept the payment because technically he hasn't killed the target. In the end, he says he's done, and the cop echoes his words. Cicero goes to the crime scene and on the way realizes that all the informants involved in the case had the same supervising officer for her partner, the cop. It dawns on her that he may have something to do with all of this. She calls the department, and the boss tells her that the cop was the one who asked to be assigned to the case. And then all the pieces of the puzzle fall into place. The cop calls his ex-wife to tell her that the case is over. He's in a good mood and thinks that everything will be fine, that he'll get a fresh start. But a shot in the back interrupts his flow of positive thoughts. The steel plate in the driver's head proved to be stronger than the bullet fired into it. The killer returns to his wife. Cicero arrives at the crime scene and finds the cop's corpse. The woman doesn't tell her co-workers about his past. The driver scatters his brother's ashes over a reservoir and drives his car towards the horizon. Meanwhile, the preacher passionately speaks to his congregation about the importance of forgiveness. It's interesting to note that the screenplay for the movie was written by two brothers, Tony and Joe. Perhaps they drew inspiration from their own relationship. However, it is hoped that the movie is not autobiographical. In order to prepare for his role, Dwayne Johnson had to take an extreme driving course. Nevertheless, his strong connection with the character was evident from the moment he read the script, which prompted him to eagerly accept the role and start training immediately. As always, please check the movie name in the description. In the meantime, let us know in the comments if you have ever had to resist the urge for revenge or if you have given into it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more cool recaps.